Welcome to another episode of Sim Sundays. This week, we got a pretty interesting guest based on my old school days as a child and having arcades in like the malls and in miscellaneous stores and things. And I really miss them now. Tom, you really took over this conversation. I was just fascinated with everything that was going on this whole entire time. So I'm just like, yeah, that's really interesting. Like just a couple of random things. But man, this week was good.
We had Oliver Raison, who is the co-founder of the F1 arcade. Now, there's one in London, but he reveals that he's opening at least 30. I've heard a higher number, but he said at least 30 between now and 2025, and then hundreds, right? So these are a little different to the F1 to the arcades that you'll have had as a child. The F1 arcade is nuts. It looks incredible. There's 60 sim rigs provided by Vasaro. We had Neville Slade from Vasaro on a couple of episodes ago.
Which I got.
So if you haven't listened to that, go
Those
back.
Those Vasaro rigs are beautiful rigs.
They are so nice.
I would love to have one so much, just right behind me back here where I sit in this beautiful
and for only
rig.
$50,000 you can, Chris.
I know.
So we this week spoke to Ollie about his background, which is a lot of fun. He has a very, very cool CV, and how he got into the F1 arcade. But then we also kind of asked him some questions that sim racers would want to know. Sim racers who haven't been, to know, are they going to enjoy it as a sim racer? And then for those sim racers who have been, who have all shared a very similar sentiment, no spoilers, he addresses it, which was really interesting because I had been and I thought this thing, and then he said what he said, and now I think differently.
Now you're like, oh, that
could that have been any
sense.
vaguer?
Right.
So yeah, enjoy this episode. Ollie, hi, welcome to the show.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. I'm currently up a mountain near Salzburg, near the home of Red Bull in Austria.
That is very cool. And I like that you're near the home of Red Bull. You're on Red Bull's front door and you're wearing a bright papaya McLaren cap.
I know. And to be honest, it's not even McLaren that I like. We had a big McLaren event at F1 Arcade, and they very kindly gave me a pack which included a hat. And because I'm sleep deprived from having a 19-month-old child and not washing my hair, I just grabbed it and stuck it on. So I think I'm actually going to be an Audi fan when they finally launch.
Ooh, okay.
I'm just waiting. That's who I'm hooking into.
Nice. So have you always been a fan of Formula One and motorsport, or has that been something that's developed since F1 Arcade?
Okay, so I mean, I do feel that I'm quite old these days. I'm going to be 45 this year. I did definitely love F1 in the 80s when I used to watch it with my dad when it was on Channel 4.
Sure.
Then I moved to Australia in 1988 because my parents were desperate to get away from Margaret Thatcher. And when we were there, I had a group of friends that were massively into Formula One. So all through the 90s, we would have events kind of every Sunday night because we were often watching at sort of 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. So I definitely was a fan through the 90s. I probably dropped off a little bit in the mid-2000s when I got a job that required me to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I was drifted away. I got back involved during the Ross Brawn excitement, thrilling little short era.
Nice.
And then realistically, I did kind of drift away again during the Mercedes Red Bull domination period.
The domination period, yeah.
And then through F1 Arcade and this whole new thing, I've been they're pulling me back in. You've
fallen back in love. Well, your job that started at 4 a.m. What on earth was that?
I was a breakfast radio host on a commercial radio station in Australia.
Oh wow,
that is very, very cool. I don't think so. Hang on, so you're a radio presenter? You were a radio presenter?
Not really. No, I started. I was a comedian in Australia. I started doing comedy. I was so bloody good. Sorry, I was so good that a radio station came calling and offered me a job. So what was I? I was like 25, 26 years old. It's just one of those things that I couldn't really say no to. In a way, I wish I had said no to it because it completely killed my love of doing stand up just due to the hours. But yeah, a lot of fun. Like I did two and a bit years, and then one day just about Easter, I woke up and decided I'm finished. And so I sort of quit that same day, and then 4 weeks later, I'd moved back home to the UK. So that was 2007. So I've been back in the UK since then.
Turnaround. That's also a nuts journey from like comedian to F1 arcade. So we'll dive into that. But I don't know about you, Chris. I feel like there's a lot of pressure now. We're with an audio broadcasting,
like an actual broadcasting.
I know
professional
we've got all the gear, but.
You do, and I have won Australian Commercial Radio Awards. Don't let that scare you. But
we're back from our audio issues, and you were about to tell us what your award was for Radio Broadcasting Awards.
God, I mean, it was so important to me. We didn't even go to the ceremony, but it was for best on air comedy produced segment.
Oh, okay.
That's major. You didn't
2006. Go? Well, no. At the time, because we were based in Perth, Western Australia, and the awards were taking place in Sydney.
Oh, okay.
And we had a show to do the next day, and we were still a brand new show. So our bosses thought they would go on our behalf.
Oh, wow.
They didn't expect that we would win, but we did win.
Okay.
I've been really admiring your LinkedIn profile because it says that you're a co-founder of Lazy Susan's Comedy Club, which is a pretty funny name for a comedy club. I don't know why, but it is just funny. And underneath, you said that you were just being a legend at making people laugh, which is pretty bold.
I like that. Okay.
What can I say about that? So I would say that I probably didn't take LinkedIn too seriously for a number of years.
That's refreshing, actually.
Lazy Susans. I got into comedy in 2004, I think. There was a comedy competition in Australia called Raw Comedy, and almost 90% of Australian comedians, as a rite of passage, do raw comedy.
Sure.
And essentially, it's a competition that gives you an audience, like your first ever audience you perform in front of is going to be 300-400 people. It's an Australia-wide competition, and it's like a series of heats, and then you go into a final and things like that. I did that. I loved it. Within a year, I found myself opening up a comedy venue in Perth because I was a massive comedy snob, and the other places in Perth at the time, I was in my early 20s. They were run by people in their 40s who were doing sort of racist, old-fashioned style stuff. And me and my friends at the time were massively into Izzard and the Boosh and surrealism and Flight of the Conchords kind of things like that.
Okay.
Flight of the Conchords, brilliant.
So, I managed to... My friend Yasmin had a friend called Jeff. Jeff was reopening this really luxury kind of bar called the Brisbane Hotel. Upstairs at the Brisbane previously, before he redeveloped it, there was a thing called Effie Crump Theatre, which was kind of like a old school failing independent theatre. I went to Jeff. We sat on bricks out the Brisbane Hotel. I said, give it to me. I can turn it into a comedy club. I don't know why I thought that, but I just did.
Well, okay.
So we went in, we completely rebuilt it, and we created Lazy Susan's Comedy Club, which still operated under the name Lazy Susan's until last year, and it's now called Oasis Comedy Club. But
Lazy
it was
Susan's
Western Australia's first purpose-built comedy club.
No way.
And that was,
That's amazing.
I was a legend at making people laugh.
You also said that you're not the funniest you could have been. You usually save that for wooing ladies. Again, this is on your LinkedIn profile.
That is fabulous.
Yeah, wow. What's LinkedIn for?
Well,
yeah.
Well, usually, but this is the thing, right? Because I'm looking through everything that you've done, and you basically co-founded or like directed a lot of fun stuff. So I don't think you've ever had to use your LinkedIn profile to get a job. Which is why you can basically just write whatever the hell you want on it.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. I've never had a job interview, so I think that's why I always just use LinkedIn as like, why am I here? What am I meant to do? Okay.
I guess I have to have one of these, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. For somebody has said that everyone needs to have a LinkedIn profile, so we all have one. I mean, I can't speak. I'm being incredibly hypocritical here because I have a LinkedIn profile that I use far too much. I'm kind of addicted. I don't know why. I actually hate that about myself, but here we are.
Essentially, all of my jobs and my whole adult life has just been an exercise in ensuring I can remain as childlike and immature as possible for as long as possible.
That should be everyone's goal, let's be honest.
Well, I mean, you've done an incredible job at that. Like, you were founder of Whiff Waff Brothers, which was a ping pong night out, Pattern Cutters Warehouse, you're creative specialist at Ace Bounce, Putt Shack, and then back to Bounce again, and then social entertainment ventures, so Bounce Ping Pong, Putt Shack, High Jingo, Ace Bat, Wonderball, Games Gurus, and now F1 Arcade. So you've basically just worked in having fun.
Yeah. So I mean, I can give you a very quick synopsis of how all these kind of things fell into place. So it all kind of started on a cold and wintry night in February 2010 when I had been at a party, and because I knew that an ex-girlfriend was going to be at this party, I necked almost half a bottle of vodka quite quickly, and Dutch just courage. A bit of sort of Dutch courage.
There you go.
And at the time, the person whose party it was, he was quite high up in the Tory party as a chief advisor to David Cameron. I'm not a Tory, by the way. Love Labour. But what had happened was that I was tipsy, and so I thought it was time to sort of hold court with all these high up Tories at this house party. And so I ended up talking to them for a number of hours. They sort of enjoyed it so much that they swept me off to Soho House in the middle of town. Right. So we were there at sort of 3 a.m. I was very, very inebriated to the point where I went to the toilet, I looked out the door, and I saw the number 55 bus, which I just knew took me home. Even though I left all of my stuff upstairs, my instinct was just getting that bus. So I left Soho House, just got on the bus. I got to where I thought near home was. I walked up the road, and instead of turning right on the canal, I turned left on the canal and went the wrong way. I found myself walking down the canal. I heard some music. I just walked into this place. It turns out it was this like warehouse space right on the corner, right on the canal in Dalston. I just barged in. There was like 10 people just sitting around drinking, listening to music, smoking. I met the dude who'd sort of taken over the lease. We got talking. The next day I went back, kind of did some stuff for them. And then it was the World Cup, the Football World Cup 2010. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be great to have this warehouse as the World Cup warehouse and to put on to show the games and have street parties every day, because we were right outside was a street, and then it was the canal, so we had no cars coming past. And I looked online and I saw what London's biggest TV was to watch the World Cup. It was like 12 foot. So we built a TV that was 12 foot and 1 inch to make sure we had London's biggest TV. And so then we did World Cup warehouse in this warehouse. And it was like £4 to get in, but bring your own alcohol and all that kind of stuff. We had a street party every single game, and it was just huge. So the end of the World Cup came. I was doing the dishes in the kitchen, thinking about what to do next, and I started thinking about Angelina Jolie, what's her name? Jolie Pitt, whatever, and Jennifer Aniston, how they just wouldn't get along if they met each other because of the whole Brad situation.
Right, and sorry, this is not the origin story I thought we were going to get with.
No, but it all makes sense. It'll all make sense because it literally links into Whiff Waff Brothers. Because I was thinking, right, how do I get these two people who hate each other to battle it out? So I came up with this thing called Celebrity Ping Pong, where I just got everybody who I knew to come to the warehouse dressed as a celebrity, and they'd play table tennis against each other. If they had beef already, we'd say what that beef was. If they didn't have beef, we'd make it up. So in the end, we had a winning celebrity who happened to be Prince. Prince was the winning celebrity. after that, I was like, right, I want to do that again. Ping pong was so amazing, but I don't want to get people to dress up every single time. So the Whiff Waff Brothers was born, which was just like really good music, table tennis, alcohol in a warehouse in
I want to go to
Dalston.
Whiff Raff Brothers. This sounds amazing.
What?
We used to run it from like 8 o'clock at night till 8 o'clock in the morning. And pretty soon I realized that just letting two dudes play table tennis against each other wasn't going to be great for crowds because we have like 100 people show up. So I ended up getting a microphone, getting speakers, and just creating games on the fly. So we could have like almost 100 people playing all at once. From Whiff Waff Brothers, which was really, really fun, a lot of success, I got in touch with Adam Breeden, who was the founder of All Star Lanes, who was developing a concept called Bounce, which is bounce ping pong. So he and I and his other business partner, Dov, we met up about a year before the first Bounce opened. I explained everything that I'd done at Whiff Waff Brothers. I turned ping pong from like this really stuffy kind of serious sport into like an entertainment event. And then we sort of spoke about, well, how do we marry the spirit of Whiff Waff Brothers with the sort of high-end hospitality of bounce ping pong? And so that is where our first connection came. So I came on board to work for Bounce. I developed all these things called premium bookings, which were essentially the spirit of Whiff Waff Brothers, but for groups who would pay for it.
Okay.
So you would pay like a spend per head, and you would get like myself or other comedians to come and run these very entertaining events for you. That was just incredibly, incredibly popular. From Bounce, yeah, obviously we went to Chicago and we opened Ace Bounce. So I was there for most of 2016.
Nice. What was Chicago
Also,
like?
then, yeah, it was great. It was great fun. Yeah, what can I say? Really lovely people. Everyone was sort of thinking that Chicago is this like, oh, it's crazy being in a big city. I'm like, it's not. It feels quite like a bit of a very large country town, Chicago, compared to London or New York or something. But yeah, it was really great. Met a lot of really good friends that I'm still friends with to this day, and also met a lot of learnings as well. In particular, just with different audience types and such, and working with the Americans. And then we came back and we started work on Putt Shack. So Putt Shack is the super high tech mini golf concept that we built, which is now, I think there's 5 or 6 sites in the UK, and there's about 15 sites in the States. There's going to be hundreds of them. So we opened Putt Shack, and then straight away we started work on High Jingo. Don't worry guys, this is getting us very close to the F1 part. So High Jingo we worked on for a further 2 years. High Jingo is again super high tech bingo concept that we launched in Shoreditch. Really spectacular. It's actually like walking into a game show.
It says it's high octane bingo.
Okay. Yeah, it's really exciting. It's more like a West End show than bingo.
I just want to go to all of these places.
I know, this sounds like a lot fabulous,
it sounds
right?
like you've basically just like broken down all the barriers of like what you ought to do in life, and just been like, well, this would be fun, let's do this, and then this would be fun, let's do. Before we get to F1, right? When you're doing all of these ventures, clearly they're all very successful, and you're learning a lot as you go about running businesses, hiring staff. It looks like all of your roles were very much in the creative element of it. What was the plan? I kind of think I know what the answer is going to be before I ask this question. But as you're going through all these ventures, have you got some kind of vision of where this is all going?
Not me. No, not me. So I'm very lucky in that I've worked with the same kind of core group of 4 people since 2012. Adam Breeden, who's the CEO, who's the sort of hospitality genius, who can build these concepts and get them funded and get all the excitement and everything. And then Diane Jervis, who is just a sort of master operator in building the concepts and ensuring everything gets done. And then Janique, who's really, really great at systems and process and project management. And then me, I'm really terrible about thinking about the future. I'm very lucky that I have a fiance who's planned my retirement for me. But my role has always been it's always been in the creative thing. Like, I mean, even going back to like why I did Whiff-Waff Brothers the way I did it. When I used to host house parties in Australia, every single house party I did had to have a theme, and it was like a really spectacular theme, and each room would have something different going on. And I just did that because it's like, well, what would I want to go to if I was going to a party? It wasn't
where
just
do you
like,
think this came from? Where do you think this kind of like entrepreneurial application of your creativity started? Because a lot of people are very creative, but wouldn't think to like, this would be cool. Like, a lot of people have that thought, right? This would be cool, but it's a huge step to then go and be like, so I'm going to build it. Like, where did this come from? Is it like parents are entrepreneurial, or something you studied at school? Like, where did it come from?
That is, I've actually never been asked that, and I've never really thought about it. So if you give me a couple of split seconds to think about it.
Yes, we did it. We asked a proper podcast question.
Oh gosh, it's okay. Even like with radio, so I never planned to do radio, but even as a kid, it was just I would always be making tapes and things like that. So I'm not a great entrepreneur. I just know who are the right people to attach to.
Okay.
That can often be the best kind of answer. Like, if I was to do things on my own, it would be an absolute disaster because I'm so sort of scatterbrained, and it's really hard for me to start a project and finish a project. Even at home, like making toast, I can just forget to butter it sometimes.
Oh, dry toast. That sounds grim.
I get reminded when I bite into it.
That's obviously where you draw the line with creativity. Then eating, you just have toast without butter. That's obscene. That is ungodly.
Yeah, but then you have to imagine the Marmite.
Oh,
I don't know.
I see.
But my parents are not entrepreneurial. I was never really told that I couldn't do something, and I've never. That's another thing. Actually, this is probably pertinent. My first year at university, I had a tutorial teacher, and the first 2 weeks of lessons, the only thing she taught us was strangle the inner critic, and that always just stuck with me because the only person who says you can't do something is yourself, and that was actually really big because, like, for the next 2 or 3 years after that, every time I was doing something, I thought, "Oh, I don't want to do this. I can't do this." It was just remembering, like, thoughts aren't real life. You don't have to listen to this thought right now. You want to do it, just do it. And another thing is, don't necessarily put time limits on things. Like, if you have an idea of sort of where you want something to go, probably not with a concept like F1 Arcade, because you do need time limits. But if you have a general idea of where you want to end up entrepreneurially, your brain will kind of naturally keep the doors open to allow you to end up there. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I've always done it. Like, I know where I want to end up. I've always had this picture of like a house in the mountains in Spain overlooking. And that's always been like, that's where I sort of want to end up. And I've never thought, how am I going to get there? I've just thought, what's the best opportunity for me to keep growing, keep developing?
Okay.
Yeah. So
it sounds like you have one of those rare superpowers, which is tremendous confidence and trust in your own instincts. So every time you get one of these little like buds of an idea, you basically know straight from the beginning, okay, this is going to work, and so why wouldn't I go and pursue it and make this a thing? Because it doesn't sound like somebody who suffers from like creeping doubt or like imposter syndrome, because it's like, well, I've got this idea and I know it's going to work, like, because my instincts say it's going to work, and you fully trust your instincts.
Yeah, you're very right, and it's almost quite a confronting thing for me to think about. Good podcasting, guys, because I was even saying this to my fiance the other day. Like, as I do get older, I've been sort of, this is like therapy now. I've been a little blasé about thinking about the future, because it's not that everything I've done has turned out brilliantly. It's just that there hasn't really been anything that hasn't really sort of worked out in order to maintain my happiness. Because it's always about like being content and being happy. It's never really been about financial gain or anything like that.
So you set the bar of success at happiness, and anything else is a bonus. But by aiming for happiness, given that you're a leisure entrepreneur, that tends to be the secret sauce anyway, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, I've set the bar at content. I think
okay.
if I'm happy
wow.
all the time, I thought about this a few years ago. Actually, it's like I don't like, people always say, "Oh, I want to be happy all the time." I'm like, well, actually, you'd get burnt out if you were happy all the time, because you'd be swinging wildly. Like for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if you're always happy, then you have to have the downtime. So
that's interesting.
Content.
I hope that's not the case. I hope that phrase, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, I hope that doesn't apply to happiness, because then every time you're happy, you'll be like, oh god, I'm gonna be paying for this tomorrow. Tomorrow I've had the best day ever. I'm gonna be miserable tomorrow.
Oh yeah. I have to admit, this is not something that I've studied scientifically.
There's no data behind this.
A gut feeling. Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe I am selling myself short. I should try and be happy every day. But actually, to be honest, I would find it a bit boring to be happy every day.
Oh,
it's
you like
nice
the variety of occasionally.
You need
being
those challenges, right?
But then I think there's a lot of creative people who are quite famously up and down. Maybe that's a requirement. Okay. Anyway, so we'll send an invoice for the therapy session straight after the show. I hope that was enlightening for you.
I feel weightless with happiness.
Anytime, it's part of the service. So, okay, F1 Arcade. What was the first conversation you had about F1 Arcade?
Yeah. Okay. So we just got up to High Jingo.
Mm-hmm.
We'd worked on this for 2 or 3 years. We were in the actual launch week, about to have our celebrity launch, all that kind of stuff. So that was going to be March the 17th, 2020. And as you know, we had a global pandemic.
Yes. We did.
Called COVID or something. COVID.
No, it doesn't matter. Don't say the C word on the podcast.
Exactly. So that meant that all that work we'd done, we had to just shut down straight away. It has reopened, but we're all shut down. We're all back at home. Now, Adam had received, probably in February of 2020, an email from Amelia at F1, who I believe she's in a senior in licensing and things like that. Very kind of short email. Adam, would you be keen on talking? I'm kind of paraphrasing this email, trying to remember what it was, but essentially it was, we're kind of looking for somebody to give a license to own and operate F1 venues within the hospitality sphere. So Adam had got that email in February or January, not really done anything with it because we were opening High Jingo. So if the C word hadn't happened, there was no way we would have done anything with this, because we were opening a new concept.
Yeah.
However, that then meant that Adam got in touch with me, Janique, and Diane, the four of us who'd always worked on all of the concepts before. Said, look, this is what we've got, guys. What do you think? We then had a series of meetings on Zoom, started putting together a concept of what would it look like to have sim racing? What would it look like to be really focused on F1? How would sim racing work? Because if we made a venue for sim racers, within a month, we've burnt through the whole audience. So how do we actually take sim racing and give it to everybody else? So within about 6 weeks, we had a whole concept built out. We had a whole proposal, all that kind of stuff. We then met back up with Formula One. We took them through our idea. I took them through the deck, all that stuff that we'd worked on. And in short, they loved it. They loved it so much that they ended up pitching it to Liberty Media, who's the parent company of F1, who also loved it, and so Liberty ended up taking like an equity stake in our company.
So they
as well.
invested. They funded the first venue.
No. We self-funded. Liberty just took a small.
Okay.
When we say self-funded, we put together. Well, Adam put together all of the investors. I found a few, but we had to raise. I mean, that was something that Adam says was the hardest thing he's had to do, was fundraise during a global pandemic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, nobody's going to want to. Everyone's appetite for risk is going to be fairly low if you're all wondering if this is the apocalypse.
Yeah, so there was like a lot of kind of major things that we had to then. So once we kind of got the green light from F1, we then had to find a sim supplier. We then had to work on who's going to build the game for us. We then had to work on a bunch of other systems and processes, finding venues, working with landlords. Fortunately, I don't have to do a lot of that sort of hard brain work stuff. But I suppose that brings us on to Visaro, because I think they were probably one of the first people that we got in contact with to partner with.
Interesting. Okay. And so how did you? Did somebody already know about Visaro? Because Visaro is fairly, even amongst sim racers, not everybody will have heard of Visaro. Everyone knows of Fanatec and Simucube and Track Racer and Next Level Racing, but Visaro, because their entry point is like 30,000 euros, they're a little bit more difficult to a lot of sim racers will find them unless they're an ultra high net worth individual.
Is it worth me kind of explaining a bit about the concept and our knowledge of sim racing at the time? Great. So I was the only one who'd done any sim racing at that point out of the four of us. And as you will know, when a sim racer says, come and have a go on my kit, and you sit there all excited, and then you get to the first corner and you found yourself spinning in the grass for infinity.
Yeah.
It's not always the most pleasurable experience for a first timer.
Yeah.
I had been in the past an avid Gran Turismo driver from first PlayStation way back in the 90s. Any
wheels?
Pardon?
Did you ever buy yourself a wheel?
I had no wheels to that point.
Okay.
I did buy a Logitech wheel once we knew we were going to start building this concept, and I stuck it to my my table in my my living room, and then had to get I had to buy weights like barbells, not to actually pump iron, but to hold my pedals in place, so they didn't keep sliding across the floor. So yeah, I had not had any wheels. I was the only person that played any kind of physics-based racing to that point. I think the others had maybe had a go on Daytona, the old arcade game.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, great game.
So I was. That's why at the very start I was kind of like, it was really important for me to explain to the other guys, like, we want to put sims in our venue, but sim racing is difficult, and our audience, like 99% of our audience, we get through at the moment 7,000 people in one venue a week. 99% of them have maybe spent 10 seconds in a sim in their whole life. So we had to make sure that the product that we were developing was going to appeal to them first, and then we would bring on other game modes for the sim racers. So that's kind of where we were at with sim racing. We knew we wanted to do it, but we knew that we were going to have to really have a lot of control over the sim and also the game in order for our audience to get the most out of it. The reason that Visaro got involved is it's a little bit of a strange coincidence, really. So there was a chap called Stephen Slade who we'd worked with on
I see where this is going.
And I knew, because Stephen is one of those wonderful people that just loves to talk, and he's absolutely great. And I think maybe one time in 2018, I'd mentioned a sim racer just out of the blue, and then he told me about his sim setup for the next half an hour. I was just looking. Yeah, In what? Sorry.
And was this Neville's brother, cousin?
So that's what I thought. So I went and looked up Stephen on LinkedIn because we wanted to actually talk to him about sim racing, and then straight underneath it was like Neville Slade, Vasaro sim racers,
and they're not related.
And so they're not related.
What?
It was just a complete coincidence.
That's nuts.
And they knew each other. They knew each other because Stephen had bought a sim off Nev.
Oh,
so it
so
was
there
just
were second connections, and they had the same second name, and so they just popped up. That's
exactly. So
wow.
I thought there was like a lot more to it than that. I thought, we tried like 7 or 8 different rigs, and then we stress tested them, and then we finally came to the decision.
so what we actually did was we got in touch with Nev and the team at Vasaro, and we took a few trips. I think they're in Maidstone, somewhere in Kent.
Yeah, where I grew up.
We took a few trips down there, saw what they had. We also because we were really specific about what we wanted. We wanted something that looked really kind of spectacular and slick,
no wires,
but didn't take up a really huge footprint as well. So we went down and we saw what they had, and we really loved it. And a few months later, they came back with like initial kind of designs for the sims. We definitely had looked at other sim manufacturers in the interim, but I think we felt that a lot of the ones that we'd looked at, because we knew nothing about sim racing at the time, and it was a lockdown, so it's not that you can go and explore and play on other people's sims.
Right.
So it looked like a lot of the other ones that we were looking at were sort of only off the shelf. They didn't have the capability to build the bodywork that we wanted, or
they weren't turnkey.
Yeah, exactly. And a big thing for us to let Vasaro know was our customers are going to be absolutely brutal on these things. Like you cannot imagine how rough they're going to be. It's so much different than you going to a trade show and having one of your staff kind of monitoring a sim all day, to just letting 7 stag do in a row on sim 35, for example. Like it's absolutely crazy. That was a big thing. Like speaking to Vasaro, like making sure that all the components we were going to get were super robust, really interchangeable. So they're really, really, really good to work with, and we didn't realize that they were top of the range, but we definitely wanted to work with top of the range. We were doing a concept with Formula One. I mean, this was and
they're bespoke. They look great.
Yeah, thanks. They do. They actually, Vasaro and Formula One worked together to get the shape that we have. So that came from Formula One's kind of design team as well.
Oh, wow.
That's very cool. And obviously, we had Neville on the show a couple of shows back, and his background is incredible. I don't know how much you got to speak to Neville or learn about his past, but some of the way the beginning of his career, I don't know how to. So he basically invented like the modern concept of a website, like the first moving image on a website. Like he did, like he was like fundamental in developing Java. Like he is a very, very, very talented man who now does all of the design work himself for the Vasaro rigs. So I can imagine the opportunity. Well, I know because I asked him. The opportunity to work with F1 is like, incredible.
Right.
So and it's kind of paid off. Like you walk into the F1 arcade. And as a sim racer, you walk in like, wow, this place these rigs are insane. I cannot wait to go on these rigs. Like they look great. Like the Moser wheelbases amongst sim racers aren't necessarily a premium sim base, but the wheel rims that you have on them, they look the part. They look incredible. The LED lighting the strip they have across the top, and obviously you've disabled all the like traction control ABS knobs, but they look great. You walk in, you're like, this looks like a Formula One rig.
Yeah, the intention on the knobs and the traction, we're actually, I should say very quickly that we're actually having Moser. They're going to be creating a steering wheel for us bespoke.
Oh wow!
So the one that you see in venue, we're having a new version of that's sort of more in line with what an F1 wheel would look like. And also we're removing a couple of the things that were a little superfluous.
Yeah,
but
Sure.
The knobs and dials and buttons and stuff, the ABS, like the fine tweaking, we do intend in time to have those all live for certain race modes and for certain skill levels.
Okay.
So it's just not something
Should we talk about that then? Because I think there's a couple of things that I think sim racers would be really interested in learning from this podcast. I think, I want to ask why we're not using, or why you're not using the F1 game at some point. But also, let's go into the mode. So as a sim racer, any sim racer who's listening, who's been to the F1 arcade, will immediately have recognized that this is not it's not set up as a sim. It's very much set up as an arcade, which is fine. The name is F1 Arcade, right? So you have, even on when I went, which was I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, or 4 or 5 weeks ago perhaps, I went. There was 3 options. It was beginner, intermediate, and pro. I went to the pro level, and there was still steering assist, braking assist, ABS was on massively. All the assists were on. It did feel like an arcade. But obviously, yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, you announced a new mode.
Well, just on what you were saying there, so we launched. I'll give you some sort of background. Like, when we wanted to launch this concept, we actually have 4 racing modes that we wanted to launch with. That is head-to-head, team-based, all venue racing, and Grand Prix sessions. What we did do, because of the way that the world was with lockdowns, with wars, with dev time and things like that, it meant that our actual dev time got massively overblown. We ended up launching with only head-to-head and team-based racing, which are our casual and new player modes. I will get on to what all venue racing and Grand Prix sessions do in a moment. What you were just saying about the pro setting as well, until only probably 6 weeks ago, there was an undetected bug in code that was ensuring that if you'd picked rookie, casual, semi-pro, or pro, it wasn't pulling your skill settings through to your drive. So the pro that you had is not the pro that we developed in our test center.
Interesting.
The pro that we actually have, there's no ABS. There's basically no settings, no skill settings on.
No assists.
No assists on.
Right.
So
right, I'm going back.
That bug has all been fixed. But what you were speaking about as well, we have also now launched our elite mode, which is all the same settings as pro, except we've turned the racing line off and it's manual gears. So
perfect.
And so now we have 5 racing modes, from rookie to elite. It was every time I would read online that somebody had selected pro and it hadn't worked, I was distraught. I was distraught for a long time
because when I drove it, my thoughts were, okay, do you know what? I get it. This is not for sim racers for the reason that you said earlier. You have 7,000 people a week. 50 of them might be sim racers. So it makes sense to ensure that the other 6,950 people enjoy themselves and aren't constantly coming off the track and spinning. I was like, I remember starting it being like, I thought the pro one would be. I was like, do you know what? Actually, I get it, because you probably want those 6,950 people to be able to select pro and feel like, okay, well, I was on the high setting and I did all right. Blah, 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 blah.
I feel your pain. I feel it deeply every time that I saw that, because it was just. So I would go to the venue and I would say to the tech team, like, it's not right. It's not right. And it wasn't until we moved offices and we set back up our test center sims and we got back to like exactly how I'd set it up in the test center. And I was with the tech team. I was like, guys, look, this is how it should be. This is how rookie should be. This is how cash should be. And they were so different to what we were having venue. And then the geniuses that they are. So I think Michael, who is one of our new hires, one absolutely awesome dude he managed to find this one thing that was stopping the skill settings being taken from the game and being applied to what you'd picked. And I know that sounds really harsh to say that sort of from a business perspective. But what we are is we are a computer game, and it's a game that although we didn't develop R Factor, we developed the way that we want it to work.
The interface,
yeah. So we like if you play any computer game, if it's any console game, like I'm massively into FIFA, and every 2 weeks I get updates of what they've just done. Like, we've removed this, we've fixed this. We're kind of doing the same now. We're going back and we're letting people know, like, guys, we spotted a bug here. We've fixed this now. Thanks for letting us know. All that kind of stuff. So,
but
we will. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, just on that point, since you've mentioned it, interestingly, the F1 arcade is not using the F1 game. Now, I think there's some perhaps obvious reasons, but it'd be interesting to hear it from your point of view.
Yeah, I mean, we initially spoke to the Cody's guys, and I've had a Cody's F1 game. I had my first one in 1987. So to actually be in a meeting with the guys who actually developed that game in their bedroom all those years ago was like cool. A real sort of it was a thrill for me. It was like this top-down racetrack, and it had little oil patches and spanners. You had to just drive around like that with a keyboard. And the Cody's, I mean, it's such a great game, and the way it looks, and it's just, I mean, it looks spectacular. What we wanted the game to do for our audience, and the amount of development that they would have had to have done, it was just to do with like time and costs just becoming astronomical. And so we took it as far as we could to try and see what we could do with Cody's. Then F1 actually put us in touch with Studio 397. And when our tech guys, so Gav Williams, that's weird, I don't know his last name. Gav Williamson. He's our CTO. He's an absolute genius as well. He's the one that realized that with working with R Factor, it meant that we could create an overlay that sits directly on top of the game. We couldn't do that with the Codemasters game.
Right.
So all the things that we wanted head to head, teams to team racing, all venue racing, and our Grand Prix sessions to do from a player and also from a spectator perspective, we weren't able to get that. So that's actually why we went. Options. Yeah, exactly, and also with the official F1 game, the yearly update costs as well were in the sort of 6-figure mark, and it was just getting a bit too much. I mean,
right, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think most sim racers would have worked that out because R Factor 2, it's a lot more moddable. You can build overlays. Like, there's a lot of sim racing centers around the UK that were like Simply Race in Milton Keynes, for example, that uses R Factor 2 for that very reason. It's far more versatile. But this was interesting because obviously it was the first officially F1 endorsed center that had opened. So it was kind of interesting that they hadn't used the F1 game, or the F1 game hadn't adapted for it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to also kind of understand that at the time, because we hadn't opened our doors and anything like that, and what we were doing hasn't been done anywhere to this kind of scale and to the audience that we wanted to appeal to. It was like a risk that they would have to take on as well. So it wasn't just a financial thing. It was like
you weren't established enough for them to know that them putting their time in it would pay off.
Exactly. Like, and another thing is they were in the process of sort of being acquired by EA Sports.
So they had a lot on their plate.
They had an awful lot on their plate, and I mean, it's a great game. I go home and I play it often on my console now, just because I get to familiarize myself with different tracks and things like that. I suppose also just a couple of modes that we want to introduce that really are for the sim racers.
Okay.
I don't know if it's worth talking about those now, because I mentioned that we were starting to launch with 4 modes. We had to launch with 2. We've got the next 2 are coming within the next sort of 2 or 3 months. So the first one is called All Venue Racing. All all venue racing. So anybody who comes to F1 Arcade, before you come, during your visit, whenever, you're encouraged to set up your arcade hub, which is essentially your driver profile.
Yeah.
Because as you know, when you play the game, you scan a QR code, and that takes you to the arcade hub on your phone, and it enters you into the game. So by doing that, we can keep a record of everything the player's ever done within the game, lap records, all that kind of stuff. It also means that they have direct access to Arcadians, which are the in-game currency that you can win and spend on things like trips to Silverstone, headphone, like loads and loads of things that we're going to have. But yeah, all venue racing is graded racing. It will take place on sort of set times during the week. So let's say it starts on a Monday night at 6 o'clock and finishes at 10 o'clock. You are graded based on how well you've driven in the past or whatever. So your first ever visit to an all venue racing, you will start in grade 9. However well you do, you're almost going to be accumulating XP based on your finishing position, overtakes, if you've beaten people that are better than you, fastest starts, all those kind of things.
Right.
So you progress. So you'll only there's 3 classes of racing. So Class C is grades 7, 8, and 9. Class B is 4, 5, and 6. And Class A is 1, 2, and 3. So that's the kind of best of the best. If you're racing in Class A, which is 1, 2, or 3, there's no racing line. You have to be on Pro or Elite. The prizes of Arcadians are much higher, so you can really kind of win a lot more.
Okay.
And yeah, so I mean that's the kind of thing that it's a community-based kind of thing. So you don't need to be the absolute best to do it. You can come down and you're not that good, and you can just race against grade 9s and grades 8s and 7s.
But at least you're going to be racing against people who are of a similar ability, which inherently will make it more fun.
Oh, yeah.
It's a similar ability. And also throughout the night, there'll sort of be 4 wildcard races as well that you can enter. And wildcard, anybody can enter. So if you enter a wildcard and you're grade 8, for example, and you beat a grade 4, because you've beaten somebody so much higher, you'll progress a lot faster.
Huh.
This sounds incredible. This sounds very sticky. As in, if you had one within 45 minutes to an hour of you, you could imagine making a regular trip in the same way that like a go-karting fan would go go-karting once a month or whatever, as opposed to it being like Madame Two Swords. You might go once every 10 years. I suppose that's the problem that you're solving here, is that you're no longer an attraction, you're now an experience.
Yeah.
Right.
No, exactly. I mean, for me, all of these things that we've ever done have always been about building communities, and that's different communities within different race modes that we have. Like I always see any kind of group as a community rather than a target market, for example, because the people who get involved with all venue racing, if let's say we do it 3 nights a week, you could not show up for a month and go back and you're still in the same grade. You choose the races that you want to enter. So it's not like you're given a set time that you have to do. You could go there and decide, you know what, I just want to sit and have a few drinks tonight and maybe I'll enter 2 races. Or you could go, right, I want to progress. I'm going to do every single race I'm available for this week. We're going to have commentators like commentating on select races, like just randomly. The plan is to like have the stream of the race being shown on a mega 10-foot screen as well.
Nice. Is it 10 foot and 1 inch?
10.1.
It is actually. Everything is always 1 inch bigger. It's a 10-foot 1 inch screen. Yeah. Oh. So yeah, I mean, it's all community focused, all about entertainment, all about sort of just like creating something that's really sticky. And if it's something that you love, and if you love sim racing, or you're new to sim racing, or you love F1, there's just something that you could say, you know what, this is the thing that I do every Monday night.
Yeah. Well, it's fantastic. I went and I was just shocked by how many people were in the. I went on a Tuesday night, just after some meetings in London. Went off, met up with a friend. We went around, and it was absolutely rammed. It was full. It was, and it was. I got the opinion there were 60 rigs in there, and there were 60 people at that moment falling in love with racing online. which from a grid finder perspective is interesting because there's a lot of people here will be converted to, I'm going to go get the game, I'm going to race on my PlayStation or PC or Xbox and interact with F1 in a more immersive way. And it was very exciting to see the launch of the watch parties because I'm one of those people who I've never been to a physical F1 race. I became a fan through the game, so it made sense, I guess, for the venues full of people who are racing the game to then be able to get together and watch the races together, because those fans will be far more engaged because they've played the game. And you're only getting people that have played the game in that venue. It's not like a pub where, like, probably 20% of people might have played an F1 game. At the F1 arcade, everybody has had a go and learnt the track. And the idea of, I don't know, Australia coming up this weekend, being able to go, well, not this weekend. I wouldn't go and do some laps at like 5 a.m. to be able to watch it at 6 a.m.
We have. I think we've already sold 200 tickets at 5:30 a.m. for people.
Oh, you have?
Down.
Oh my god!
Okay.
I was just thinking it would work for an afternoon race where you could do some races at that track and then immediately watch it. So you're kind of like, you're understanding the character of the corners a lot more. But I suppose there's obviously a lot of hardcore fans willing to get up at 5:30 to do some laps and then watch.
It was always my intention that F1 Arcade would be the gateway to both F1 and sim racing for a new audience, rather than necessarily being... I mean, so you've been there and you've seen that we're not just like an F1 museum where everything is like there's tires on the wall and stuff like that. It was never our intention to be far more like accessible. A fan zone. Yeah, because we want every concept that we've ever done, we've wanted to make sure that it's, if you've not got any interest in it, you're still going to absolutely love just hanging out there. So it was really important to us from the very start that anyone who comes down can just enjoy it from an entry level kind of experience. And the watch-alongs in particular, like, we haven't even necessarily gone after those new and casual F1 fans yet. The people who've been coming to the watch-alongs are those really, really passionate fans who will come down and get there 3 hours early, and they're wearing a full full.
Do you have to split
Ferrari
up the Max
kit.
and Lewis fans? Actually, I guess they probably don't care about each other very much anymore, do they? But
Not
just
as much,
to
yeah.
split up the Red Bull guys from everyone else. Just like the wall of bouncers in the middle.
Just put all the Alonso fans in the middle.
Well, all of the 50-year-old Alonso fans, who remember him from year one, So the watch-alongs have been really great. Another thing that we are just about to introduce, like literally on Monday. So for our team-based racing, that's our bread and butter offering, we want people to do team-based racing because, let's say 10 of us went down. We want this to be a social experience where we're chatting, we're eating, we're drinking, and we're playing on teams together rather than all competing against each other.
Right.
So for that's why we developed the races as almost sprint races of only 4 minutes each race. Yeah. However, for head-to-head, there is a chunk of people who would like a longer race. Whilst we can't go overboard on the length of the head-to-head races, from Monday, the head-to-head races will be just over 6 minutes each. So you will get 2 flying laps in. So we'll be able to check. We'll be able to also mark fastest laps as well as race times. But also we do have the Grand Prix sessions coming. Grand Prix sessions is a 15-minute qualifier, 10-minute 15-minute warm-up, 10-minute qualifier, and then a 25-minute race, or however many laps we get in 25 minutes. So for those ones, you're actually going to be driving for 50 minutes of actual driving in them. So there are these longer races coming for the people who really want that kind of chance to just really test their sim skills against each other.
So this concept that I'm about to ask about kind of flies in the face of everything you've said so far in terms of the brand, the feeling, the customer base that you're trying to appeal for. I'm going to ask it anyway. Are there any intentions to use the F1 Arcade as a venue for esports?
I like that question because it's something I've been mulling on for quite some time.
But the reason I'm asking is because before this interview, I was like, why on earth wouldn't they? It makes total sense to you've got all these rigs here. You can just turn off all the settings and you could have like fun esports events. But actually, having now listened to you for the the best part of an hour about what F1 Arcade is about, the atmosphere that you're creating there, the people that you're targeting, and the people that are enjoying it, it actually doesn't make as much sense to me anymore as it did before this conversation.
Yeah. So I would say that to have an esports element is something that is on a sort of mid to long term plan. I feel that with the all venue racing, once we develop that and build an audience and we get enough people in this kind of elite divisions, we are then in the position to turn our game and our experience into like a genuine tournament-based thing for the best of the best. Mm-hmm. Once we do that, we then are in the esports world. We have a few new hires coming on board who have worked for teams like Quadrant and Veloce and stuff. Like, we didn't hire them for that reason, but they have that know-how. So I would say that yes, and also because we are opening many more venues of F1 Arcade, both in the UK, in Europe, in the States, in Australia, in Asia, and Middle East, we plan to have the best of our best competing at different venues around the world and creating almost
makes total
a
sense,
global kind of circuit. So yes is the answer, but we need to develop that almost organically to get to a point where we've got enough people engaged in playing a game for it to really, really take off.
And I suppose you want to properly establish the idea that this is for fun. This is for people who have never gamed at all, people that perhaps don't watch F1. You can come here and you can have fun. And I suppose if you do the esports thing too soon and people see in the news esports names doing esports things and it's all very tough and it's all very serious, it might put people off going. If
that's very true.
Well, I'm just a game. I'm not a gamer. I'm not into all that esports stuff.
Yeah, that's so true. And inversely as well, when we did open, mistakenly we allowed an element of our marketing at the very start to be going out to gamers and sim racers, which was not the right thing to do at all, because what we hadn't been designed specifically for them. So they were coming down and not getting the experience that they would have at home because, for one, we hadn't finished our core product yet. And two, they are the audience that we want to appeal to once we've fully developed and fleshed out exactly what our core is for everybody else. So yeah, absolutely. It was definitely worked both ways. I still feel that sim racers and people who are really into it are definitely going to be a key part of our business moving forward and into the future, because they have a level of expertise and passion that we haven't even tapped into yet.
Right. They might be the smallest portion, but they'll come back the most.
Exactly. But we as operators were not in the position, because none of us are sim racers, to be able to fully create an experience for them just yet. We definitely want to get there, but we have to build our core first in order for us to be able to. We really wanted to introduce sim racing to millions of people rather than just a few thousand. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're all for that.
Yes.
We're all for that over a grid finder.
Cool.
Well, look, Ollie, thank you so much for your time. It's been really, really great to chat. I suppose just before we leave, it'd be good to just ask the final question, which is like, where is F1 Arcade in 5 years' time? Is it all about just rolling it out the venues, or is it something else?
Well, we've always been very keen on innovation and evolution as well as a company. So before we even started, we've kind of got like many phases of development that we want to get to. It's definitely our main focus right now from the CEO, the CFO's perspective is getting all the sites signed off, opening the new sites. But from my perspective and the CTO, there's so many things that we want to introduce with the game, with the arcade hub, with the Arcadians, with creating networks, with creating communities. So in 5 years' time, I would hope there's sort of 30 plus venues around the world. I would hope that we have a game that absolutely suits any level of driver.
Okay.
I would hope that we just consistently excite and entertain our audience and the people that come to us. And that we also turn a whole lot of people onto F1, onto sim racing. Yeah,
I just goals. It's a broad spectrum of goals, but I mean, it's also anchored spectrum. in your core thesis throughout your career of fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Fun. I mean, yeah, my whole life has to be fun, or I cry in the corner. But this is also the culmination of all of our kind of last 10 to 15 years work. Like all of the concepts that we've done before have been amazing, but this is sort of our magnum opus. Like F1 came to us and said, can you build something for us or that we can that we will give the license for? This is what we've done, and it's proved to be so much bigger and more spectacular than both we and they could have dreamed. And so yeah, I really want F1 Arcade to just be the leading sort of social entertainment, competitive socializing, whatever you want to call it, venue and brand in the world.
Well, it's really, really cool. I really enjoyed it, and now I've had this chat. I'm actually going to London next week, and so I'm definitely going to visit. Because I want to
let me know, and I'll sort it out for you.
Great, even better. Well, Ollie, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a really, really great chat, and I know that our audience is going to be absolutely fascinated by hearing. If they haven't been, obviously they'll be fascinated about what to expect when they arrive, and if they have been, I think it'll be interesting to hear about the improvements for sim races that you've made. So thank you for chatting to us. Great.
No, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Well, that origin story of his is pretty amazing, and interestingly, it's the first time we've ever had a professional broadcaster on the show. So hopefully, he did say very good podcasting guy. So I feel good about that. But all in all, it makes sense that he made this F1 Arcade concept, because his life has always been about just making things to supply fun to people. And
as his professional therapist, I agree with your evaluation.
Don't forget to send him that bill for the therapy session,
Yeah, that was fascinating. Like, his origin story is brilliant. Really, really interesting guy who is quite clearly just been focused purely on creativity at every venture that he's done. And having been to the F1 Arcade, you can see how creative it is. It's not, if you imagine like the other sim racing venues that exist, they all look very, very similar. This one is very, very different, and they are, as he said, targeting a different demographic to sim racers, but it does now cater for sim racing. I was really happy to hear about the settings bug that they had, which explains a lot from when I went.
Yeah, that does.
But also kind of interested in this all venue mode. We for reasons we'll be heading down to London fairly often over the next few months and years. So I think I might make a little ritual to go down and do this all venues thing. Try and get my A license.
Yeah,
with my B license and my A license.
Hopefully, I can see get that over there as well, because I'm nowhere near where they're actually going to be putting them in the States, because the States they're huge. But hopefully, when I go over to London, visit Grid Finder and all you guys over there, we can take a couple of trips to this F1 arcade, because it sounds like a lot of fun to me. But if you're, looking to join a league, or you've started in F1 arcade and now you want to, perfect those skills, we have tons and tons of leagues on gridfinder.com for you to go ahead and join any day, any platform, any simulator, whatever you want to race.
Anywhere in the world.
In
a world.
If you also are a league owner and want to get some more drivers for your league, go ahead and list your league on GridFinder, and we get a very, very solid group of drivers that are constantly looking for new leagues to switch around to on different days and things. So list your league on GridFinder. We'd like to thank the episode sponsor, Track Racer, as always, for sponsoring the podcast. If you're looking to upgrade your rig, you want to change something out, go to trackracer.com. Other than that, that'll do it for this week. We appreciate you being here, watching and listening, or listening, whichever you choose. But we will be back next week, next Sunday, with another episode. Thanks.
Goodbye.